Greetings and salutations, and thank you for clicking on the video. I do appreciate it. This is going to be a bit of a ramble about the hardware that I use here at the homestead. I'll show you all the machines on my home network in this video, and I want to talk a little bit about some other things as well. So let's just jump right in. First thing I want to tell you guys about was I did an interview with a fellow named Jonathan D. over the weekend, who is putting together a research project about Linux power users, and he's talking to a lot of people and getting his facts together, and it will be very cool once it gets done. And once he starts posting content about that, I will share that with you, because I think it's actually going to be a really cool sort of resource for anybody who is looking to move into using Linux as their daily driver, both at home and at work. So that should be a very cool series. While I was talking to him, we got into a discussion about different Linux distros, and we talked about Mint for a long time. He likes Mint, and we were talking about it, and I got to thinking about it, and I said, well, about time for me to go back home to Mint. I have been running Ubuntu GNOME 16.04 on my main machine here, and all the videos that I've posted in the not too distant past have been recorded on that particular setup, and I said, it's time for me to move on. I had a lot of fun playing with the GNOME desktop, but I kind of just sort of started missing the polish of Linux Mint's Cinnamons. So it wasn't that Ubuntu GNOME wasn't performing, it was just that I kind of wanted to go back to having everything in the house on the same operating system, which really and truthfully is very cool, because then everything talks to each other in a nice way over the network, and you don't have to think, okay, well, this is the Ubuntu machine and this is the Mint machine, so I need to do this on this and that on that. So that was my project yesterday, was putting things back. So this is what it is. It's Linux Mint 18.2, and it's running on my Dell Precision, which is the main machine that I do videos on. So anyway, I posted about that change on Facebook, and a fella said, he said, you hop distros so much, and it's like, well, I have several other machines, and they run Linux Mint. I've been running Linux Mint for 10 years, somewhere. So it's like, no, technically it's a distro hop, but then again it isn't, because I really am invested in Linux Mint, and that's the one that runs on everybody else's computer in the house. So I guess we'll go ahead and jump into that, and we'll talk a little bit about it. And we've got this really super highly well-produced video going here. So these are pictures of the computers that I found on the internet, gang. I thought about going around and taking pictures and stuff like that, but it's really not that big of a deal. The first computer that I'd like to talk about is the first computer that I really had any success running Linux on, and that is the Dell Inspiron 570. So this machine, 2009, 2010, that was my big computer purchase that year. I bought it new from Dell. It came loaded with Windows 7, and this was really shortly after Windows 7 came out, so it was one of the early machines. And the one that I got, I ordered the AMD package, which I really wish I hadn't done later on when I moved to Linux. Linux and AMD don't get along very well, but it actually did really good, and this machine has run every Ubuntu distro from like Ubuntu 9.10 on at one point or another, and Linux Mint and Fedora and Arch and any other distro that you could think of I've tried out on this particular machine, and it is still up and running, even though it's not my daily driver machine anymore. The specs on the machine weren't too bad. When I bought it, it had 4 gigabytes of memory in it. I upgraded it to 8 gigabytes of memory. It had a 3-core Athlon AMD CPU in it, and then it had integrated AMD Radeon graphics, and it was like a 4200 card in that machine. And it works okay. It does have limitations. And right now, this is the machine that my fiance uses, Cindy. This is her main machine that she works on every day, because when I got a better machine for doing this sort of thing, I moved over to that one. So this machine is still up and running, and right now it happily runs Linux Mint 17.3. It doesn't do well on Ubuntu 16.04 or Linux Mint 18. So it will probably run 17.3 until Linux Mint 19 comes out, and then I'll give it a try. And if it doesn't work very well on that, then I'll just give up, because it's definitely paid its dues. This machine just keeps on going. And that's the first machine that I had. And I made a bunch of these videos you see on this channel on this machine. Nothing. Really the downside to these particular computers, if you find one somewhere used, is that they work really well, except that you really are not going to be able to find parts to upgrade them, like finding things like dedicated video cards that will work in them and power supplies and stuff like that. It's really hard. Once you change one thing, you probably have to change another, and it's kind of locked into what it is. It's got 4 SATA slots on it, and it's got 2 mounts for 3.5-inch desktop hard drives in it. So that's about as far as you can push this thing. The Intel version was better though, because the Intel version actually had a built-in RAID controller. There was a lot more that you could do with that one, but at that time I was into Windows more than Linux, and AMD worked well on Windows at that particular point in time, and I was doing a lot of audio video stuff, so that's why I bought the thing. So that was the first computer, and it's still up and running. Like I said, it's on the network running Linux Mint 17.3. Here's another machine this is kind of like the family computer. Everybody has an account on it. This is a Dell Studio, and I forget the serial number, honestly. They made a bunch of these. These things are about, I think they made these about 5 or 6 years ago, a little further back probably. I'm not exactly sure when they were made and put out, but these are actually really nice machines. They're big laptops with 17-inch monitors. The screen is wonderful, as you can see in this picture here. This is the picture I took of it the day that I was trying to load it up, so that's Ubuntu 16.04. This machine currently runs Linux Mint 18.2 on it with absolutely no problems whatsoever, and it's all Intel, so you don't have to install proprietary graphics, and the graphics work really, really well. Intel works very closely with the Linux kernel developers, and a lot of their drivers for video are just baked into the kernel. There's no need to install anything. It's just there, and it's not that you're getting an open source driver which was back engineered. No, it comes from Intel. So anything with Intel graphics in it tends to work really well with Linux, which is one of the reasons I bought this machine. The processor in this is a Core Duo, so it's 2-core. And then as far as memory is concerned, it has 4 gigabytes of memory in it. So it's not a super high-end machine, but this machine, curiously enough, is really good for listening to music, watching videos on. It does really well at playing DVDs, for instance. It's a nice little machine, which is what my kids do with a computer most of the time anyway. They sit down and they're doing YouTube and Facebook and all the stuff that kids do, and they're playing games on it. This thing will run Minecraft like nobody's business, and the fans don't even spin up. So for a kind of a low-end machine, it works really well, and I've never done anything to it. I didn't try and do any upgrades. I have considered popping more memory into the thing, but it works so well as it is for what it does that I just have left it alone. There's nothing wrong with it. I bought it refurbished. There was a fella up in Pennsylvania who was selling a bunch of these machines, and of course that meant that he had gone through it and cleaned the dust out and all the little things that you do to a computer to refurbish it, and it was a really good deal. I think I paid $185 for it, so it's pretty awesome. And here's another shot of that machine. This is actually on the wallpapers page because I thought this was a pretty cool shot, and there you go. And that shows the DVD drive. And full keyboard. Very nice. Those Dell Studios are really great machines. Not super powerhouses, but really comfortable to use. And they're just large, and if you like kind of carrying around like a portable desktop, there you go. That's what these things do. Now, the machine that I'm using right now, and this isn't the world's greatest picture of this, so my apologies. This is just what I could find on the internet. This is a Dell Precision T3500 workstation. And it's sort of like a pedestal server. It's got a lot of server-grade parts in it. And I got this from a fella called Easy Sit on YouTube, who has a great YouTube channel, and he talks a lot about Linux. And he doesn't have kids, so he's got time, or his kids are grown, actually, you know what I mean? So he's got time to really tinker. So he's always playing with computers and putting things together, and he had this one come up, and he wasn't quite sure what he was going to do with it. And so I said, hey, I want it. And he said, all right. So I paid the shipping, and it made it here. So it was a big donation to the Easy Linux project from Easy Sit. You can find his videos on YouTube. great stuff there, and it was very kind of him to do that. And we knew it was a risk because it's a huge machine. The machine's very big, it's very heavy, and we were afraid it wouldn't make it. But it actually made it from Arizona to Eastern Virginia, no problems whatsoever. So that was awesome. This is a view of the inside of the machine. You can see that there's lots of room for improvement. You could actually put 2 processors in this computer. The one that I have is like the one pictured. This is not my machine. This is just another picture I found on the internet. Those 2 hard drive slots, they're on a panel that swings down, and the processor is behind that. And there is a air tunnel that air blows through, and then there's your PCI slots up there on the upper right under the power supply, and that's where the video card lives. Now the one that I'm using now has 9 gigabytes of ECC RAM in it, so it's hardened RAM, and it can take up to 24. Now I know there's machines out there these days that can take 64, but you got to remember this is a 5-year or older machine that I'm using. But I did order 24 gigabytes of memory for it, and I didn't get the right memory, so it didn't work. So I put the 9 gigs back in it, and I found that I can make do with 9 gigs just fine for the things that I do with a computer. So I'm going to let it ride, and it seems to work really well with what I've got. But it's kind of odd. This has 6 slots for memory, so it's a triple channel processor, and the one that I have has it's an Intel Xeon processor, and I've got it running with 8 cores. So it's a really fast processor. It's almost as with the Xeons in those days were as good as the i7, the lower end i7s are now. So Xeon was real high end back then. It was usually founded on servers and professional grade stuff, and now you'd have to get like an i7 in a modern computer to match it. So it does hold up well, and it runs really good for what I do, and we're recording this video on that machine right now, and it's really nice to work on. And the other thing about this, it has a built-in Intel RAID controller. So for when I first got this machine, I had 2 hard drives running. I had 2 Caviar Black drives running, and they were twins, and had it running in RAID 1 for a while. The performance wasn't that great with that Intel controller, and it was kind of bothering me that the controller itself in an older machine like this could be a point of failure, so I have gone back to discrete drives. And I've got like the first drive is like a Western Digital Raptor. It's an old drive, high hours, but it checks out okay, and that's the drive that has the system on it. And then I have one of those Caviar Blacks running as just the data drive with the home directory on it. So that seems to work out really well, and I like this computer. It's almost a little too much, and when I first got it, I called it Big Boy because it was just this huge, giant machine. And but it's a fun computer to have around, that's for sure. So that's the main machine that I use every day. That's the one you usually see in videos. And then finally, the one that I'm running is this Pavilion G6. And this was one that was given to me by my ex, believe it or not. She had it, and she gave it to me for my daughter to use, and I ended up getting a hold of it for a while and using it as a test bed for Linux distros. And now it has become sort of like my second computer and my son's computer that he plays games on. This one has 8 gigabytes of memory in it, and it has an i5 processor, and it has Intel graphics. And curiously enough, when I install any Linux distro on this, there are no drivers to install at all, except for the little Intel microcode little driver there that has the patches for the Intel processors. That's it. It's the only one. So it runs completely out of the kernel, and it does really well. I had another machine that I have talked about on the channel. It was a HP EliteBook. That machine did really well too, except that that had like integrated graphics in it, and the problem with that is that it really would overload on some things. And I don't think that was a Linux incompatibility as much as this thing probably ran like crap on Windows as well, and so it just wasn't really that good of a design. But this G6 seems to be really good, and you can find all of these machines I'm talking about in here in this video for a couple $100. I have a really hard time at this point in my life, both financially and philosophically, laying out a huge sum of money on a computer when there are so many to be had out there that will do what you need them to do. I don't need the most, biggest processor power or video power on the planet. So therefore, these little machines tend to work really well, and they all run Linux well too. Now, there is one thing about my T3500 that I would like to do, this machine here, and that is that when I got it, it came with an NVIDIA card in it, and I think it's a Quattro 570. I think that's what it is, and it's only got 512 megabytes of video RAM, which actually has worked out to be enough to do what I need to do, but I would kind of like to beef that up a little bit. So at some point I might replace that and upgrade that NVIDIA card a little bit, but other than that, I've been very satisfied with the performance on this machine. And I like to find things that I can just clean up and they work and they're in good condition. I'm not a big I don't really think that you ought to dump a whole lot of money into any one of these older computers, because it is an older computer and you never know that there might be something in there that might go poof, and all of a sudden there you go. You don't have you've dumped a lot of money in a computer for parts and cards and stuff like that, and then something that you hadn't thought about breaks, and that can happen with any age of computer. But if they work and they do what I need them to do, I just pretty much leave them alone. So that's the network, man. That's what runs in this house right now. I've got machines come and go. At one point in time, way back maybe a couple years ago, I was doing videos on this old E-machine that had a Intel Celeron processor in it and 2 gigs of RAM, and I was doing that just to show people that, hey, you can do productive stuff with a machine like that, and had Intel memory in it with I think it was like 256 megabytes of video RAM in it and stuff like that, which today is pretty small, but you'd be surprised what you can do with it. I always thought of that machine as being like a virtual machine in hardware, because what do you do when you set up a virtual machine, like in VirtualBox? Usually that's what you give it. You give it like a 1-core CPU, and then the most video memory you can give in a virtual machine is 256 megabytes, and there you go. So I always thought that was kind of funny. It was like running a virtual machine in reality. But anyway, there you go, gang. That's just a quick look at what I'm running around the house here. At some point somewhere down the road, I think if I get to it and the used market starts to slack off, I think the next machine I want to buy, really honestly, is like a System 76, because they make such great hardware, new hardware for Linux. But right now the used market is hopping. There's a lot of machines out there. Just go to eBay, go to Craigslist, and you can get them for really good prices. And if you the Dell laptop, the Studio, when it was new, the selling price on that was like, what was it, $1,800? So it's not garbage. And a lot of these computers are just built like tanks. They just run forever and ever and ever. And I talk to people on a regular basis who are running Linux on 10-year-old computers. My brother has an old Dell Dimension 3000 with a 32-bit processor in it. I can't remember whether it's the early Celeron or the very late Pentiums. I don't really know what's in that machine. And the only thing he did to it was put 2 gigabytes of RAM in it. It's got a 40 gigabyte hard drive on it, and the thing just keeps on chugging. And he sits there and goes, hey, it does what I need it to do, so I'm happy. So that's one of the things about Linux I really like, is the fact that you can use it on a variety of hardware, and you can save a lot of money, because all of these machines that I just showed you, this one would probably do fine with it, and maybe the Dell Studio too, but I know that the HP certainly did not like Windows 10 at all, because when I got it, the fellow who had refurbished it for my ex, who gave it to me, had he'd done a really good job with it, but one of the things he'd done is he had loaded Windows 10 on it. So I didn't intend to run Windows 10 at all, but I thought, let me play around with this for a bit. So I booted up the machine, and I was going to just poke around the desktop, not even hook it up to the network or anything like that, and it crashed. It just came right up and crashed, and that's why she got rid of it, of course. It wasn't like she was being super nice. It was a piece of junk that she couldn't do anything with. And so what I did was I never actually got to play with Windows 10. I went, okay, well, that's enough. And I put the USB stick in there that had Linux Mint on it and just blew it all off. Machines run fine ever since. I've had on that particular machine, and we're talking about the which one is it? It's this one right here, this little Pavilion G6. On this particular machine, I have had Linux Mint, Ubuntu, OpenSUSE. This machine has run Manjaro. It ran Antergos for a little while. I've loaded Solus on this machine, and it all did pretty well. The only one that didn't work with this machine at all was OpenSUSE. OpenSUSE just, there was something wrong, and I loaded it up, and the fans ran at full speed, and all of the processor cores were running at 100% on the machine, and so I couldn't use OpenSUSE. But everything else did pretty good, and right now it's also running Linux Mint 18.2, so my son can play Minecraft and his other online games on it and have 8 gigabytes of memory. Ooh, isn't that great? Now they'll run even better. So anyhow, thanks for watching. I do appreciate it. Not much to this video except talking a little bit about hardware and getting you guys up to date. I want to thank everybody who has subscribed to the channel recently. I also want to thank everybody who is sharing the videos, the clicks, the comments. We've had some really good comments come up. Lots of great discussion lately. It's very exciting to me to see this community continue to grow. So do check out Easy Linux on the web. Check out Easy Linux on Facebook. And also check out freedompenguin.com for lots of really cool stories about Linux, and all of the links to those things that I talked about will be in the description to this video. So thank you for watching. We'll do it again soon.